In 1954, a milkshake machine salesman named Ray Kroc walked into a small burger stand in California and became so obsessed with how efficiently it ran that he convinced the owners to let him franchise it nationwide. Everyone assumes that's the whole story: a burger empire built one restaurant at a time. But a few years later, a quiet financial advisor working alongside Kroc made a suggestion that would completely change what McDonald's actually was, hiding in plain sight underneath the golden arches for the next 70 years. His name was Harry Sonneborn, and here's the question his idea raises, one almost nobody asks while biting into a cheeseburger. If you looked at McDonald's income statement right now, stripped of the logo and the mascot, would you even recognize it as a restaurant company at all? Let's start with the number that should immediately make you suspicious. In 2025, McDonald's earned nearly $27 billion in total revenue, and the largest, most profitable slice of that came from franchised restaurants, locations McDonald's doesn't actually operate itself. Of that franchise revenue, McDonald's collected $16.5 billion, and after subtracting the relatively small costs associated with collecting it, that turned into $13.9 billion in profit. And here's the detail that changes everything. The single largest piece of that profit, $7.9 billion, came specifically from rent. Not burgers. Not fries. Not the 11 herbs and spices of some other fast food chain. Rent. To understand how a burger company ended up looking more like a landlord, we need to go back to the exact moment Sonneborn's idea entered the picture. McDonald's real estate strategy dates back to the mid-1950s, when Ray Kroc, still building out his franchise empire, brought Sonneborn on as a financial consultant. At the time, McDonald's was making money the way you'd expect any restaurant franchise to: small franchise fees and thin royalties collected from operators selling burgers. It worked, but it wasn't especially lucrative, and it left McDonald's financially dependent on how well individual franchisees happened to be running their restaurants in any given month. Here's the twist Sonneborn brought to the table, one so unusual for a burger company that it's still surprising executives learning about it for the first time today. Instead of simply licensing the McDonald's name to franchisees and collecting a small royalty, McDonald's would buy or lease the land underneath each restaurant itself, construct or finance the building, and then turn around and lease that same property back to the franchisee, on a long-term contract, typically running 20 years. The franchisee would run the burger business day to day, handling the grill, the register, the ingredients, the staff. McDonald's, meanwhile, would quietly become their landlord. Why would that single structural decision matter so much? Because rent behaves completely differently than burger sales do, and that difference is the entire secret sitting underneath this company's financial success. Franchisees typically pay McDonald's royalties around 4 to 5% of their sales, plus rent averaging somewhere between 8 and 15% of sales, locked into agreements that often run for 20 years or more. Those payments are frequently structured with a guaranteed minimum, meaning McDonald's collects a baseline rent check even in a month when a particular restaurant's burger sales come in lower than expected. Here's why the detail is so much more powerful than it sounds at first. A restaurant business is inherently unpredictable. Ingredient costs rise and fall. Local competition opens across the street. A slow Tuesday in a snowstorm can wreck an entire month's numbers. Real estate rent, backed by a signed 20-year contract, does not care about any of that. Whether a specific franchisee sells a record number of Big Macs or barely scrapes by, that rent check still arrives, virtually every single month, for 2 decades at a time. This reveals the actual mechanism turning McDonald's from a volatile restaurant business into something closer to a real estate investment trust wearing a burger costume. Because franchise and rental income comes with minimal direct costs attached, McDonald's isn't buying ingredients or paying kitchen staff for those locations. The company retains roughly 82% of every dollar collected from franchised restaurants as gross profit. Compare that to the restaurants McDonald's still operates itself, where the company has to cover every single expense directly: ingredients, wages, utilities, maintenance. Those company-operated locations keep only around 16% of each revenue dollar as gross profit, a difference so stark it explains almost the entire logic behind why McDonald's has spent decades deliberately shifting toward franchising nearly all of its restaurants rather than running more of them itself. Today, roughly 95% of McDonald's restaurants worldwide are run by independent franchisees, not by the corporation. That single statistic tells you almost everything about what kind of company this actually is beneath the surface.
McDonald's isn't primarily in the business of flipping burgers for customers anymore.
It's in the business of finding great real estate locations, building restaurants on them, and then collecting rent and royalties from entrepreneurs willing to run the actual burger operation on top of that land. Here's a detail that makes the scale of this real estate empire almost impossible to picture accurately. In the United States alone, McDonald's and its franchisees occupy an estimated 58 million square feet of real estate, spread across roughly 17,000 locations, situated overwhelmingly on prime, high-traffic intersections and commercial corners that McDonald's has been carefully accumulating since the 1950s. Multiply that footprint across the more than 41,000 restaurants McDonald's operates in over 100 countries worldwide, and you start to understand why some analysts describe McDonald's less as a restaurant chain and more as one of the largest private holders of commercial real estate on the entire planet, one that just happens to sell hamburgers on top of it. Now here's a question worth sitting with, because it exposes exactly why this real estate structure isn't just clever accounting, it's a genuine competitive advantage almost impossible for a rival to copy quickly. If you wanted to open a competing burger chain tomorrow, you could absolutely design a better burger, a cheaper price, even a catchier mascot. What you could not easily replicate is 70 years of accumulated ownership over thousands of the best performing commercial real estate locations in the world, each one carefully selected using decades of sales data about exactly what makes a corner profitable. A competitor isn't just fighting McDonald's burgers. They're fighting McDonald's real estate portfolio, built up patiently since a milkshake machine salesman first walked into that stand in California. This also explains something that confuses people about McDonald's franchise economics specifically, something that becomes obvious the moment you understand who actually owns the property. When a 20-year franchise agreement comes to an end, McDonald's, not the franchisee, decides what happens next, whether to renew with the same operator, hand the location to a new franchisee, or close and relocate the restaurant entirely. Franchisees invest well over $1 million to open a location, yet build no actual equity in the property itself, because they're subleasing the land and building from McDonald's the entire time, rather than owning any part of it. That arrangement sounds harsh until you realize it's exactly what makes the franchise so valuable in the first place. McDonald's has already handled the hardest, riskiest part of the business, identifying and securing a genuinely great location, and the franchisee is essentially renting access to that already proven real estate advantage, along with the brand recognition sitting on top of it. So where does the actual burger business fit into all of this? It hasn't disappeared, and it still matters enormously, because burger sales are exactly what determines how much rent and royalty income eventually flows back to McDonald's corporate. The restaurants McDonald's still operates directly generated $9.7 billion in sales during 2025, and after covering every operating cost, that produced roughly $1.4 billion in profit, useful primarily as a testing ground for new menu items, technology, and operational changes before rolling them out across the wider franchise system. The burgers are still the product customers see, and they're still what keeps every location profitable enough to pay its rent. But viewed from inside McDonald's corporate headquarters, the burger is closer to the mechanism that makes the real estate valuable, rather than the actual source of most of the company's profit. This is precisely the insight Ray Kroc is widely remembered for articulating once the real estate strategy took hold, the idea that McDonald's, at its core, wasn't really in the burger business so much as it was in the business of owning valuable real estate that happened to have a burger restaurant sitting on top of it, generating the rent that made the whole structure worthwhile. Here's why this story matters beyond just McDonald's specifically. It reveals something about how enormously profitable companies often work that most people never think to look for. The product you see, the burger you order, the app you download, the item on the shelf, is frequently not where the real financial engine of the company actually lives. Sometimes the true profit center is hiding one layer beneath the surface, in a licensing fee, a subscription, or, in this particular case, decades of quietly accumulated real estate sitting underneath thousands of restaurants that most customers assume are simply, straightforwardly, in the burger business. So here's a question worth thinking about the next time you pull into a McDonald's drive-thru. If the company sitting behind that order screen makes more of its profit from owning the land underneath the restaurant than from anything happening inside the kitchen, how many other brands you interact with every single day are secretly built the exact same way, selling you one thing on the surface while the real business quietly operates somewhere else entirely? Let us know what you think in the comments.